As the possibility of a direct confrontation between Iran and Israel grows more imminent, one pressing question arises. Will Iran receive support from allies like China? While Israel's backing from Western countries, particularly the United States, is well established, Iran's potential alliances in such a scenario remain less clear. Despite Iran's long-standing ties with China and its membership in BRICS, China's stance in this specific conflict is uncertain. The relationship between Iran and China has deep historical roots and has evolved significantly over time, particularly in the last few decades. The two civilizations first engaged through trade along the ancient Silk Road, facilitating cultural exchanges and economic connections as early as the 7th century. These interactions flourished, as evidenced by mentions of China in Persian poetry and vice versa. This long history of peaceful relations, without significant conflicts, laid a strong foundation for their modern partnership. In the modern era, the Iran-China relationship deepened significantly during the 1980s, especially during the Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988. During this time, China provided Iran with arms and military equipment, capitalizing on Iran's international isolation and helping to lay the groundwork for their current strategic ties. This period marked the beginning of their pragmatic cooperation, which has steadily evolved over the past 4 decades. Their relationship expanded into a comprehensive strategic partnership, officially formalized during Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Iran in 2016. This visit led to the signing of a 25-year cooperation agreement in 2021, which encompasses economic, political, and military dimensions. The partnership is vital for both nations. For China, Iran serves as a crucial energy supplier and a key node in its Belt and Road Initiative. Meanwhile, for Iran, China provides economic support and a way to circumvent Western sanctions. China's relationship with Iran reflects a broader strategic issue. Beijing's leaders tend to sympathize with Iran's stance on global affairs. Iran was granted full membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a China and Russia-led group focused on security and economic issues in Eurasia. Additionally, in January, Iran was admitted into the BRICS group, another initiative that China and Russia promote as a counterbalance to Western influence. China's reliance on Iranian oil plays a critical role in the economic ties between the two nations, especially as both work to circumvent United States sanctions. In 2023, China imported an average of 1.1 million barrels per day of Iranian crude oil, which accounted for around 10% of its total crude imports. This marked a significant 70% increase in Iranian oil imports compared to the previous year, largely due to the discounts Iran offers to attract buyers amidst sanctions pressure. Most of this oil is purchased by independent Chinese refiners, known as teapots, which have minimal exposure to the U.S. financial system and therefore face less risk from sanctions. These refiners have taken advantage of Iran's heavily discounted oil prices, with some months of 2023 seeing imports surge to as high as 1.5 million barrels per day, a 10-year record in Chinese-Iranian oil trade. Iran's oil exports to China represent 90% of its total oil sales, making China the largest buyer of Iranian crude. This highlights the strategic importance of Iran for China's energy security, particularly as Iran remains a reliable and cheaper alternative to suppliers like Saudi Arabia or Russia, which have also faced supply disruptions due to geopolitical factors. China's ability to sustain such high levels of Iranian oil imports stems from creative tactics like ship-to-ship transfers and relabeling oil as coming from third countries, such as Malaysia. As the world's largest importer of foreign oil, China is deeply concerned about how a broader conflict in the Middle East might affect oil prices and availability. Iran provides oil at lower prices, and any Israeli attack on Iran's oil infrastructure could force China to rely more on expensive suppliers, such as Saudi Arabia. China has oil reserves that could cover 3 to 4 months of lost imports, and oil makes up only 18% of China's total energy consumption, compared to 34% in the US. However, a major conflict in the Middle East could still jeopardize China's economic interests. China has heavily invested in energy and infrastructure projects across the region, particularly in countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. In fact, China has also invested in Israel, despite its support for the Palestinian cause, further complicating its stance in the region. China perceives a decline in American influence in the Middle East and sees this as an opportunity. It has cultivated relationships not only with Iran, but also with its rivals like Saudi Arabia. China frames its significant investments in the region as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure project aimed at increasing trade and China's influence. By positioning itself as a non-interfering power, China seeks to build a positive image among countries in the global south that view it as an alternative to U.S. dominance. However, China's limited diplomatic leverage could be exposed if the Middle East risks falling into deeper conflict, with Iran, a close ally of China, playing a central role. Despite this, China has tried to showcase its influence. In March, China brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, leading to the restoration of diplomatic ties. China has also attempted to mediate other regional disputes, like hosting Palestinian factions Fatah and Hamas for dialogue in Beijing. Despite these efforts, violence has continued. Although China's oil trade with Iran gives it some influence, Beijing seems to prefer capitalizing on America's involvement in global conflicts rather than reining in Iran. A United States distracted by wars in Ukraine and the Middle East might have less energy to confront China over issues like Taiwan or the South China Sea. However, China is not eager to fuel the conflict. Its military ties with Iran remain limited. While there has been speculation about China providing satellite technology for Iran's missile program, their military cooperation under the 2021 agreement has resulted in little beyond joint drills that Western analysts have deemed insignificant. Despite talk of $400 billion in Chinese investment in Iran over 25 years, Beijing appears hesitant to commit to such heavy investments, especially when compared to its more strategic relationships with Russia and North Korea. China places more strategic importance on its relationships with Russia and North Korea, both of which share borders with China and serve as buffers against United States influence. However, even with these countries, China maintains a cautious approach, supporting Russia's defense sector while refraining from providing weapons for the war in Ukraine. China also opposes Russia's threats of using nuclear weapons. As violence escalates in the Middle East, China may be reluctant to see further escalation. In early October, Iran launched missiles at Israel, while Israel has continued targeting Iranian-backed groups in Gaza and Lebanon. This instability is troubling for China, which is the most powerful member of a group of countries, often called the Axis of Upheaval or Quartet of Chaos, that includes Iran, North Korea, and Russia. These nations share a disdain for the United States-led global order and often collaborate secretly on security issues. Despite China's military posturing around Taiwan, it has limited appetite for conflict. China views its allies as useful for challenging American influence, but remains cautious, preferring to avoid taking the same risks as others in the group. In the Middle East, China has no desire to be drawn into the complex regional conflicts. If a full-scale confrontation erupts between Iran and Israel, China is likely to remain on the sidelines, hoping that its interests remain unaffected by the chaos.